everybody. Welcome back to another episode. And I just love podcasting because it means that I get to talk to my favorite people. And today I get to talk to Juliet Hammer. Welcome to the podcast, Juliet.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi. Yeah. And I have been kind of like talking a little bit about movement on the podcast. And I thought, you know what? One of the best people in climbing that I love to hear talk about movement is Juliet. And so I've invited her to kind of get her take on movement and how she coaches movement, kind of like how she got into it. And I was able to get some listener questions from my membership. So we have some interesting questions, not all related to movement, but we got to sneak some good ones in. So Juliet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like who you are as a coach, a climber?
Hi, yeah, my name is Juliet Hammer. I am a climber and climbing coach living in Chattanooga, Tennessee currently. I grew up in Virginia and started climbing as a kid. And then when I went to college, I started climbing outside and really loved it, and eventually moved to Colorado, Denver, Colorado, out of school. And in Colorado is when I began my climbing coaching career. And I've been doing that for almost 5 years now. And yeah, I primarily bouldered when I was living out in Colorado. But now that I've moved back to the South, I've been digging into some sport climbing, which is something that I had enjoyed when I was back here when I was in college. And so it's been nice to return to that.
Yeah. Awesome. And have you competed?
Oh, yeah. I did. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I competed as a kid in the USA climbing circuit, and then also did some collegiate competitions, and then did a couple of open nationals as an adult, but I don't really compete anymore. It's definitely not something that I enjoy as a climber quite as much.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're somewhat of a legend in that Triple Crown competition. Is that right?
Yeah, when I first moved back to Chattanooga in 2021, I participated in the Triple Crown series and was able to win, and now I'm retired from it because you got to end on high.
Yeah.
So never again.
Man, because that is like such a brutal competition. I only know a little bit about it. It's like basically you get 24 hours or something to climb as many. What's the format?
So that one is that's 24 hours of Horseshoe Hell, which is in Arkansas.
One.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, the Triple Crown is a series of 3 different outdoor competitions that take place over the course of a couple months. But the days are brutal. It takes your top 10 scores.
Yeah.
And it's, definitely full days of climbing.
Yeah. Damn. Awesome. Yeah, competition's definitely different. But good for you for like doing it and saying, you know what, I'm good. I don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I do maybe one a year, one like local, if there's a local thing, I'll do one a year. And every time after I'm like, I'm good on that for a while.
Yeah.
It's good to push out of your comfort zone every now and then. And that is definitely uncomfortable for me. So
yeah. Right on. Awesome. All right. Well, I guess so. We're going to be talking about movement. I find this kind of a difficult question, and I actually asked my buddy Ryan, who I had on the podcast as well, because he's a movement teacher. But I don't think he would say that he's a movement teacher. But I did ask him this question, like, what is your definition of movement?
Yeah. Simply put, my definition is getting from point A to B. Whether that's covering a distance or accomplishing a task, it's just, how you get from A to B.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So then, in terms of your like climbing movement coaching, how do you, I guess, have people understand that movement is such a big part of getting better? Because like a lot of people seem to focus on strength. Like strength is so tangible. How do you steer them toward, hey, like here's this other thing that you could focus on?
Yeah, it's honestly, I wouldn't say that I necessarily um, drive people towards it in any way. Necessarily, I think, yeah, everyone's on their own climbing journey, and if someone wants to focus on strength, that's totally okay. Uh, Generally, when folks come to me, they're already in the place where they're ready to start working on their movement. So it's not necessarily something that I have to like quote sell to them or anything like that, or like convince them of, which is nice. But climbing does have these different facets to it. Strength is definitely really important, and there are people who maybe don't focus on strength enough, but then there are people who maybe focus on strength too much. So I think it's a conclusion that a climber pretty much has to come to on their own, just realizing that maybe that's where the deficit is from. Or if they're not sure where their deficit is, I'm happy to help them identify. But yeah, I wouldn't say I necessarily like convince people that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a more of an organic process for them, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. And do you mostly coach movement? Is that like a thing that, because it seems like you have been, at least on social media, you seem really excited about it. And is that like a focus right now that you're like really into, or is this something that's always been there and you're just kind of showcasing it right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I've always been interested in the movement side of coaching, and as a climbing coach in the industry, it is hard because climbing has so many different factors to it. It feels important to at least be proficient in some regards of being able to coach strength, being able to coach the mental side of things, and being able to coach technique. So originally my first offers had to do with strength, but then I always knew I wanted to move more into the movement side of coaching. And for me, one of the reasons is because it's a lot less prescriptive than something like strength, where it's just a big puzzle, and there's never, one size fits all solution. Not to say that that's the way it is with strength necessarily, but it's like you said, strength can be a lot more tangible. You have your results, you lift more weight, et cetera, et cetera. But with movement coaching, there's just a lot more fluidity to it, and it's just a really fun challenge for me as a coach. So that being said, the clients that I work with, we do incorporate strength training and of course the mental side of things, but a large part of what I do is coaching movement.
Yeah, so you're also a certified strength and conditioning coach for the NSCA. That to me is like the gold standard for anyone coaching strength, and that's really awesome to see a person like you have that credential. And what's interesting is like, we got to go to these seminars and you're with these other strength coaches, and you actually realize that when you interact with other strength coaches, that's all they do is the strength and the conditioning. They don't work with athletes on technique because that's not their specialty. And I really do think that climbing coaches, and especially coaches who have like the CSCS, like it's multifaceted. It's like we really have to think beyond just strength. And I find that really unique. Like there's not a ton of climbing coaches who have kind of like the full spectrum. And I really I admire that. And I'm so glad that you are talking more about movement online, because I find it really difficult to talk about the movement and technique side, especially when there's like these little corrections that you can make and using the software. So thanks so much for putting that content out there, because it really does highlight this whole, basically like the 80%, the other 80% that we should be working on, which is like the technique, of climbing. So yeah, like it's awesome that you're doing it, and I'm stoked for you. So let's talk about the movement. Where can we start? I guess, like, how do you coach movement?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And first, I just want to say thank you for the kind words on the comment or content. I really appreciate that. As I'm sure you know, social media can feel like you're just coasting into a void. So anytime I hear compliments on my content, I really appreciate it. So thank you. And there's when you get into coaching movement, there's multiple schools of thought about how you can go about it, but that kind of is the big question: is how do you coach movement, and how do you make someone a better, more skilled climber? And it's not a prescriptive thing. It's something that takes time and practice and effort, becoming a better climber, that is. And yeah, we really don't have a formula for like, okay, this is like how you coach movement, which is the exciting part of it. But yeah, so there's two schools of thought, kind of two main schools of thought. And what I think is interesting is just how new the sport of climbing is, and that we don't have necessarily like standard operating protocols for things. But the two schools of thought are, one is called information processing, and then the other is called constraint space theory, or ecological dynamics. And we don't have to get like too into the weeds with it, but basically I would say information processing is probably what we've seen historically in the industry more so, and it's what they would call a top-down approach, where it's saying, okay, your brain is the leader of everything. You want to learn how to heel hook, and so someone tells you how to heel hook, and so then you go and heel hook, and you do that over and over and over until your body then learns the movement. That's the theory of how that works. So it's saying brain gets the information, you tell your body to do it, and then hopefully through repetition your body will learn it. The other school of thought, which is the constraint space theory, is a bottom-up approach, where it's saying that your whole body and brain are an organism. That's their words, not mine. In an environment, and you're constantly interacting with your environment, and through that interaction, your body learns movement or skills based off of the environment it's put in. So from that end of things, as a coach, to coach using that theory would be to put someone in an environment with the correct constraints in order to elicit a certain response. So I don't know if that was really confusing or not, but it's basically the bottom up, where it's the body is learning, and then the brain kind of understands what the body is doing, versus the like, okay, I'm gonna like give you this information, now do it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. And so with movement coaching in that respect, I honestly can sometimes have a mix of the two different methods. I don't think, well, some people would argue they're mutually exclusive, but we can play around with things. But yeah, just something as simple as someone wants to improve their footwork, rather than being like, okay, like go do this drill where you like, I don't know, silent feet or whatever. Go do this drill where like you try and place your feet as quietly as possible. And that's like the top down approach of like, okay, I tell my body to like focus on the hold and not make any noise when I put the foothold on. The other approach would be, hey, go get on some slab climbs. Get on some climbs with really bad feet and try and figure out how to best use those feet. Or hey, like go go pick a bad foothold and use some jugs and experiment with different ways to use the foothold. Try different parts of your shoe. Try different, angles of or try different hip positions and see what feels good. So more of like an exploratory approach.
Totally. Yeah.
I know that was a mouthful, so hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, and no, that makes sense, and it would make sense to use both, because I don't know, people also learn differently. And I think words are really important too. So like your example of quiet feet, like you're not necessarily showing them how to do it, but you're giving them the feel of what it's like, the outcome of kind of like what's happening. I feel like words play such a big role in how people will move as well. And I think that could also go into the exploratory theory as well. But I do like the exploratory. I definitely, it's more frustrating as the learner, it seems like.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. Oh my gosh.
Yes, and that's part of the struggle though, because like you have to struggle and then you'll come out the other side, with better movement.
Yeah, and definitely like that's just another facet of becoming better climber, is trying to increase your tolerance for frustration in order to be able to have a more productive practice, because learning can be very frustrating.
Yeah. I'm curious. I actually have a book. I don't know, you might have recommended this one to me. Maybe not. Winkleman, The Language of Coaching.
No,
okay. And that's,
I'll add that to my list though.
Yes. It's about cueing. So you can like use the words to get the response that you want. It doesn't necessarily have to be explicit. There's like some exploratory, I think, realm there as well. But I don't know if you know this. I actually worked for my graduate studies, I worked in a motor control lab at CU Boulder. And we did this study on how to hit a golf ball. And it was like, we would give one group a cue, like a verbal cue, and we'd give another group just like we want you to hit the ball. I think it was the end of the swing. We just want you to end here. But that's your aim over there. And I think it was just really interesting that depending on the cue, people under pressure, because we were watching them, they would perform differently versus if they were doing it on their own. And so that's like, that really got me into movement and like trying to understand how coaches influence movement. It's such a fascinating world. Like there's so much. But anyway, so like I feel like when I'm curious, like how you go through your process of like someone sends you a video, because I'm assuming you do kind of remote and in person, right?
I'm actually completely remote right now.
Okay. So like this is awesome. I love to hear kind of like how you help people, especially when it comes to problem solving a project or something that they haven't quite gotten yet. Because a lot of people just want the answer.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I get a video, for one, when you're coaching remotely, it's at least like what I've learned through my years of coaching, it's a little maybe naive to believe that like, oh, I know, like I can tell them exactly what to do and it's going to work, because I'm not there. I can't feel the holds. I'm not in their body, all of that. So for one, I just kind of ask them questions about what's going on, how it feels. So yeah, let's say they're trying a big dead point move or something. and they're like, oh, I'm like not quite getting the height, or like, oh, I don't feel like I'm generating well. The first question I would say, rather than quote telling them the answer, would be, okay, like, well, what do you feel like is the biggest challenge to generating? Is it that the foot feels bad, or the hands feel bad, or what's going on there? And then let's just say, for example, they're like, oh, I just like don't feel like I can get my weight through my right foot very well. And then I'll just ask them, okay, well, are there any other possibilities for different foothold placements? Is there anywhere else that you feel like any alternate solutions? Because when you ask that, it helps the problem solving process in that either you do explore other possibilities, or you say, no, this is the only option. And then we can kind of like dive further into how to improve that current method. So just exploring if there's different methods, or if we need to refine the current one. So yeah, it's a lot of kind of questions back and forth. And then eventually, if they do need some help brainstorming different ideas or understanding why something might not be working, that's more when I give specific feedback. But I would say it's probably at least one to 3 rounds of questions before I give like a directive feedback.
Yeah. And that's awesome, because you're helping them ask those questions to themselves when they're actually out projecting in the gym without you.
Yeah.
There,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's one of the cool things about coaching remotely. Obviously, there are pros and cons to the remote coaching versus having a coach with you right next to you for an hour. And of course, it's the getting feedback in real time versus a little more asynchronous. But the cool thing is that I do get to work with people over a longer period of time, over a 2-month plus period, where we get to do this back and forth a few times, and they can learn those skills in order to then be able to ask themselves those questions in the gym or outside.
Yeah, that's cool. So when it comes to, so they're asking these questions to themselves, they're getting better at the problem solving process. Do you help them see their own movement? I don't even know if that's like literally like the right question I'm trying to ask here, but like being able to just see movement, is that something that people notice like maybe struggle with?
Yeah, I guess in what way do you mean?
I think with you and I think we work with a kind of a different demographic. A lot of my folks are still trying to understand what their own body is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And just by watching other people do a climb, they're like, oh, I see, that's what my body's supposed to do. And I think it's a little, I guess, understated that just by watching other people move, that you can then understand your own movement a little bit better, even though it's like a totally different person, different heights and whatnot. But I think that this is kind of a big hurdle, though. Like when people are watching themselves, they still don't quite get their own movement, and it for me it is challenging to help them kind of like understand some of the mechanics of movement. I don't know, do you deal with any of that, or like specific mechanics? I guess that might be a good question. Like, are there basic movement mechanics that you like to talk about?
Yeah. So definitely just the body awareness, understanding what your body is doing in space, and then also feeling like you have control over it, are all definitely important aspects to improving your climbing and improving your movement. I guess we can take an example. A really big example is just timing and coordinating your different body parts, right? Because climbing is an upper and lower body sport where the better that you can coordinate your entire body, the more effective and efficient your movement will be. So I think trying to learn concepts like that and understanding what your body is doing, I think kind of can come back down to cueing and just thinking of things like an experiment and using video for sure to kind of help aid the process. But yeah, let's take, for example, the person doing a big move again, and maybe they're just not quite timing their hips quite right for the movement. But one, maybe like you said, maybe they don't really understand what's going wrong, or they don't understand how to change it, or they feel a little bit stuck with trying to solve the movement. Just experimenting with different things, experimenting with opposites, just to see what the outcome is, and videoing those things. So let's say, for example, that person on the big move, you say, okay, like, why don't you focus on your right foot for this go? Just really think about driving through the right foot and see what happens. And maybe the movement drastically improves, or maybe it doesn't. And yeah, I guess through the coaching process, being like, okay, why did that work or not work? And oftentimes they'll kind of be like, oh, well, there might be some sort of answer that comes from that. And then you can ask, okay, try focusing on your left foot. Try focusing on your right, different cue each time, and just seeing what the different outcome is can kind of, help that person learn the effects of focusing on different parts of their body. And maybe that would be something that's helpful, but it does take time and just a lot of experimentation. And I think really the key overall would just be being open to trying different things, and literally just think of the craziest beta you possibly can and try it, because why not? And that can be really helpful for just learning their body and how movement works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the approach to exploration and experimentation, I find that this is kind of a weird question, maybe even a weird statement, that it takes maybe a certain amount of like playfulness and maybe confidence to just do a thing and to try it and like not care about the outcome so much. Do you notice like if there's like a personality difference with people who are so excited and they'll just like, I'll try everything, versus people who might be a little bit more reserved and who fear some of that maybe external judgment, maybe? Because I feel like that must play a part in how people also learn.
Yeah, I think definitely the external factors can have an impact, but I would say like it's almost just more of a curiosity mindset, and an openness to try different things is more the contrast, versus someone who maybe really does just want the answer and really does just want to be told what to do. I think that's almost more the dichotomy or the difference. That being said, of course, like fear and worrying about being judged for sure can play a big impact. But I wouldn't say that that's mutually exclusive to someone like wanting to learn or be curious.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Um, so we know that like strength is easy to measure.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help your clients measure their progress in climbing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, because the results can be so much less tangible than something like strength, it can definitely be a challenge. Just because, yeah, it's a lot less concrete. I do have my clients do benchmark climbs, where at the beginning of a program, um, and this is how my membership program is set up too. One of the first workouts you do is to pick some climbs that you'll just periodically check in on throughout your program every couple of months. And ideally, it's something that's on a board or is more recently set so that you don't have the turnover and you can return to the exact same climbs. But I have them choose 4 different climbs, 2 of them being fairly well below their limit, maybe like 4 to 5 grades below, like what you would project, and then 2 climbs that are a little bit harder, that are closer to 2 to 3 grades below red point level, just to get those different challenge levels. And yeah, just periodically checking in, and it's a good way to check in both physically and seeing how your strength is feeling on the wall, and then also just movement wise. I encourage them to take video each time they do the benchmarks too, because you can kind of see if there are any differences in movement or the way that you're moving on them. So that's a more tangible one. But I also ask my one-on-one clients, if they do come in with the goal of, I want to improve my movement or I want to improve my technique, I will ask back to them, well, how will you know when you've achieved that? And it's a good question because it will often uncover something else that is a more specific outcome that they have in mind. Like, oh, I'll know my technique improves because I'll just feel more confident on the wall, or I'll be able to on-site harder climbs or something like that. And you can have a more tangible outcome than my movement's better, but what does that really mean, you know?
Yeah. And I also notice, I think some people don't see that they have improved, even though they have.
Mm.
And I think like these questions are really, really important for them to start with. And I really like your process there, like kind of like that initial assessment. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Um, but yeah, I think, yeah, it's interesting. Like some people, even like after a couple months, even though you've seen them improve, they don't really see it. But then they're like, oh yeah, I guess I feel a little like things feel easier here, or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
it's so interesting that I think people will still feel like they're not very good climbers, even though they have improved. I don't know
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if you have conversations like this with your people at all. Maybe they're all very positive. I think like I've definitely had, like, even myself sometimes, just like, oh, I've seen improvement, but it doesn't feel good enough sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's where the maybe like working on technique, um yeah, it's not as satisfying, I guess,
Mm.
without seeing that jump in grade.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a couple pieces to it. I think one is just having people have realistic expectations of what a 2-month program might look like or what they can expect out of it, especially if they're coming in with a focus on technique. It is going to be those much less tangible outcomes, but it could be, wow, I like figured out my beta way quicker than I did before, or um, I feel less scared when I'm on sighting, or things like that, where it's not necessarily um, a a result or something you can really measure or write down on paper. So I think it's good just to have that expectation and understanding like what really is the outcome that you're looking for, and if it's something that is attainable or realistic within the given time frame. But yeah, I think too, just I think a lot of us struggle with what's good enough, or a lot of times like our goals are moving targets. So even if we sometimes do achieve the goal that we set out to achieve, once we hit it, it's suddenly not good enough, or you're already on to the next thing. Or like, oh, maybe my goal wasn't hard enough, or and just having it kind of be that carrot that you're always chasing and never actually achieving. So I think just also keeping in mind where you're at when you do set your goals, and even if when you achieve them, you're like, oh, whatever, that's not that big of a deal. Just think about where you were when you set those goals and being like, that person would be really psyched and really proud of me for where I'm at. It's just, yeah, that feeling can be really fleeting, and we can forget because we've already moved on to the next thing.
Totally. Yes. Okay, awesome. Okay, my last question on here, but I have a bunch of other questions now that popped into my brain. The last one on this list was, in your experience, like, what are some common mistakes climbers will make in their technique and movement?
Yeah, the biggest mistake I would say would be going too far into overanalysis and overthinking, and thinking it is like this linear prescriptive thing. So if you do find yourself moving in a direction where it's almost like it starts to become where you are becoming less tolerant of frustration, it could be that the thinking's become too black and white, or like formulaic. Oh, like this should solve this problem, and it becomes less curious, less playful. And that's when things, yeah, it can feel less fun. And yeah, just getting into kind of overthinking territory.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. What a great answer. I did not think you were going to go there. That was really good. Okay, so I have a question for you in terms of your own technique. Were there moments in your climbing career where you had like maybe jumps in your technique, or like moments where you're like, oh, I just discovered this thing about my movement?
Yeah, I think a big and again, it wasn't that there was necessarily any sort of tangible result, but when I moved back to the South from Colorado, and I started just getting on a bigger variety of climbs, I would really say that I really feel like I improved my climbing or became a better climber. Yeah, because I definitely like maybe got a little bit stuck, or the style in Colorado just fit me really well, and it really played to my strengths of steep crimping on overhangs, but maybe not the most nuanced or complex movement. And then yeah, when I moved back to the South to Chattanooga, the gym here actually has like way more slab than like any other gym I've ever climbed at, vert and slab, and it is still something that's not my strength, but I have definitely become better at it. And I think it just is a good testament to the value of getting on different types of climbing, even if you don't think it will directly apply to your project or what you're trying, it still will improve your overall climbing ability and understanding of movement and technique.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. All right, so let's go to my member listener questions. All right, so they want to know how, Juliet, how do you choose your projects?
It depends a lot on what my goals are. But generally it's something that's got to feel inspiring to me for one reason or another, whether it's the challenge of it. Like a project could be something that's not um at my max grade, but for example, there's like a slab climb that's a few grades below my hardest red point, but I would consider it a project because, and I chose it because of the challenge, because I just think it's a really cool challenge, and it's also just a really cool climb. Or, yeah, similarly, if I am trying to push my physical limit, sometimes, yeah, the grade does play a factor. If I'm looking for something of a certain grade, it's not a bad thing necessarily to choose something based on grade. But again, it is something that I still have to be excited about and find inspiring. So it just kind of depends on in what way I'm trying to push myself.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. All right. How about how do you balance progressing in both boulders and sport?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I can say that I've successfully been able to balance the two. I definitely find that I do have to be more focused on one or the other um, in order to really push myself in either discipline. But that being said, it's still, I guess I've still been able to maintain a decent um, ability level in either or. Just honestly, probably because the gym that I climb at is bouldering only, so I'm pretty much always bouldering in some respect, which I do think is still beneficial for sport climbing. And then it just depends. If I am focused on sport climbing, then um, that'll be where I spend more of my time outside, or if I do have certain training objectives.
Mm.
But all to say, I don't balance both.
Well, how do you, I guess, so if you are kind of like focused on sport climbing, you're training in the gym, and then anytime you go outside, would you say that you're always trying to get on rope?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the priority.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. What are there any challenges she's faced in climbing, especially as a coach, specific to her identity? That's a good one.
Yeah. I'm fortunate that I don't feel like I've faced anything overt as a coach. For sure. I don't know if there, or certainly there are more subtle things, just dynamics in our community. Um, but I can't say that yeah, there's been anything super aggressive or um anything that I would consider like a large barrier specific to my identity. In climbing itself, I do just think like uh it can be a challenge just feeling um I guess I don't want to say included, but like the fact that I am brown is not the norm, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Mm-hmm.
Especially here in the South, it's not it's pretty normal for me to be the only person of color in a room or at a boulder. Um, so it's not something that I feel like I think about too much. For better or for worse, it could just be that I've gotten used to it, or yeah, just don't think about it so much. But it is something that's there for sure.
Mm-hmm. I, are you one of few like females, or are there? Because you're double digit boulder for all of the listeners out there. Um, like Juliet climbs super hard. Like, do you have a crew of women that you get to climb with, or is it mostly dudes?
Um, I tend to climb solo or in very small groups to begin with. So I don't know if it's necessarily come up as much. Yeah, especially with bouldering, I climbed historically. I've climbed alone quite a bit. It's something I enjoy for sure. And as far as sport climbing goes too, like the ability isn't as important because there can be a variety of grades around, so it's not like a prohibitive thing. But yeah, no, I mean there's definitely yeah, there's some strong girls here that I enjoy getting out with.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great. I want to at some point talk to you about your solo bouldering.
Oh.
I think that would be like really interesting to talk about. Okay. Getting through these. So, what are some advantages that you've noticed as a shorter climber, and what are some ways you've had to train to overcome challenges based on your height? How tall are you?
I'm 5'0".
There we go. Yep.
I have a +2.
Okay.
So I got that going for me. But yeah, I think one of the main advantage that I've noticed from being shorter is that it's forced me to take on that more curious, creative mindset because I don't have, or often don't have, beta readily available. I often have had to figure things out for myself, or even, of course, height doesn't always have to be a factor, because everyone moves differently. But yeah, generally, I've had to figure out beta that works for me, and that's allowed me to really get to know my body and its abilities and things that work. That openness to trying different things, having lots of ideas for things that can work. So I would say in that way, it's really helped me become a better climber. And then as far as things to train to overcome challenges, it's really probably the biggest thing would be the mindset around it, just having to really like deal with it, because it can be frustrating, and it's important not to spiral too far into the frustration, to where a session can't be productive anymore, or allowing it to have too much of a play on my emotions. And again, just it can be a really big barrier to progress. So physically, I mean, obviously some things are harder if you're short. I don't know if there's anything that I would say like I've necessarily done that like I wouldn't recommend anyone from any height doing. So yeah, I think the biggest challenge would be, and still can be, just dealing with the mindset side of things.
Yeah. And well, just from watching you climb, you are very good at dynamic movement.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just like I will watch some of your, like when I had my main board. I switched out my main board for attention to board.
Yeah.
But I would watch a lot of your main board videos, and I'm like, this move is so big, and Juliet's just making it look like she's like 2 feet taller than me. So I was always really impressed with your dynamic movement. I feel like that is something I've heard and seen just a lot of like shorter climbers just be so good at. Dynamic movement. So yeah, it's inspiring. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a go-to hangboard routine?
Not really. If I do go into a cycle of training, it usually is just like the 10-second max hang protocol. But I've learned and encourage my clients and anyone who wants to try the routine is just to just don't go as hard as you think that you need to, or it's always it's going to be more productive if you really do keep it at the 70 to 80% effort. and not push too hard into the max effort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you dabbled in any of the edge lifts or the pickups?
Not really, to
Yeah.
be honest.
Yeah.
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 I think there's definitely a point where you get where there's just diminishing returns on finger training. So I do it more so as a maintenance or injury risk reduction method.
Yeah.
And yeah, the 10-second hangs are easy to do, and or I guess I should say simple to do, and very accessible.
Mm-hmm. Sweet. All right, last question. Which climbers have really great movement in your opinion?
Yeah. The I like this question because I'm gonna get nuanced.
Okay. Yes.
But yeah, I think great movement just means that you are accomplishing that task of getting from A to B. And there's definitely people who maybe like aesthetically, like I enjoy watching more than others, but I think it's everyone has their own style and way that they move their body, and if they're doing it, they're then it's great movement in my book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I guess that being said, I really do enjoy watching the World Cups, both bouldering and lead, and I personally enjoy watching the women a little bit more, but
Yeah.
it might be because I am a woman, but I really do enjoy watching them, and I also enjoy seeing the different styles and the different choices that that the climbers make. But yeah, and really all the professional climbers I enjoy watching. So
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Juliet. That was
you're
great.
welcome.
Wow.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this was it was a long one. I didn't realize it was gonna go this long, but I appreciate you kind of like sticking with me with some weird questions.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, hopefully we'll have you back on soon. Otherwise, thank you for joining, and thank you everybody, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.